So welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're here for this program presented by Presbyterian Disaster Assistance. Thank you for taking the time for this Building and Maintaining Resilience workshop. My name is Pat Ashley. I am a retired Presbyterian pastor living in Miami, Florida. I've been with the National Response Team of Presbyterian Disaster Assistance for about 13 years. Kathy?
And I'm Kathy Riley. I'm currently staff with PDA. I am the Associate for Emotional Spiritual Care. And before that, I was a volunteer, as Pat is, with the response team. I'm a minister in the PCUSA and a clinical psychologist by training. So good to be with you.
Presbyterian Disaster Assistance is the disaster response ministry arm of the Presbyterian Church USA. It's supported by contributions from individuals and groups, and especially by the One Great Hour of Sharing offering taken by PCUSA and I think a couple of other Reformed churches. Our goals today are to attend to common signs of stress in our minds and in our bodies, so that we become mindful of them when they are operating with us, and can let them help us notice when we are experiencing some stress reactivity, so that we can do something about it. We will be looking at ways to cope in the moment. That is, the moment we realize, oh, I am really stressed out here. What do I do? And also we'll be looking at developing a lifestyle that fosters resilience, so that we can actually be resilient people. We will be inviting you to share your thoughts, experiences, ideas several times during the course of our time together. We know that we've all been living in these days, and so the people represented here know something about resilience. So we want to be sure to share the wisdom of those of us who are gathered here. We'll be offering tools for you to help foster your own resilience. And periodically, we'll also just take a moment to look at how you might share the tools that work for you and what you learn here and notice here with people you work with, maybe staff, volunteer groups, perhaps a program group. So we'll be having both of those emphases. So this is called Building and Maintaining Resilience. Presbyterian Disaster Assistance has offered resilience programs for several years now. And when we first began offering it, especially to disaster responders, the emphasis for resilience was on bouncing back. Something happens, it's major, it stops you in your tracks, and then you bounce back. We've added a couple of other emphases in light of lived reality, and especially in light of our experience with the pandemic. Part of resilience is building the capacity to move forward from difficult circumstances or a difficult event. And the other piece of it is the ability to be able to sustain our resilience, our calm functioning, our competence, our flexibility when stress is ongoing. It just keeps on. And so we want to become more able to be our best selves, the best we can be in any given moment, while things are swirling around us. So let's begin with a tool that can be used to help us. And I invite you to do this with me. It's called Observe Your Breath, and that's what it involves. If you would, sit comfortably erect and just observe your breath. Just notice your breathing without trying to control it. There's no need to do anything with it. Just be with your breathing and stay with it for a bit. And then as you draw your attention back to being together, notice if anything happened with your breathing. Notice if anything happened within you. This is one tool that we can use to break into our stress reactivity and begin a relaxation response that we all need in order to be resilient. So, Kathy?
Thanks, Pat. So we know that many changes have been taking place in the last 3 years in all of our lives, our personal lives, our work lives. And so we want to take a minute now just to hear from any of you who would like to share, and you can either do this in the chat or raise your real hand or virtual hand and just share what you're noticing right now about what life is like at work. What kind of things are happening? What's foremost on your mind about what is work like? Or if you're in a volunteer position, what's that like for you? And again, Pat and I will watch the screen. Pat's going to watch the chat. I'll watch the actual screen. So if you'd like to share what you're noticing, please raise that hand and we'll hear from you. So I don't see any hands. I do something in the chat from Stacy that says it's been more difficult to get volunteers to come back. Absolutely. I'm here to that.
Yeah.
Kathy.
It seems like a lot of people are looking at it as the pandemic is over. We want to just get back to normal, but yet life in the church has been far from normal. We're still struggling. People are not coming back. Our families are not coming back. And it's just been really stressful. I mean, first trying to deal with ministry during the pandemic, but now trying to deal with all the situations after the pandemic, and that it's left, not only volunteer based, but just our families, our attendants in general. And it feels really rough. It feels almost like sometimes people are looking at the staff like you're not doing something right. They're not coming back. And it's just been really, really stressful dealing with all of that.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. We've heard a lot of that, and I hear it from my colleagues who are currently serving congregations that what is the staff not doing right to get people back, as if there was some magic thing that hasn't already been tried. So yeah, lots of stress there. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we have heard, we've been doing these programs with faith leaders since, as I mentioned, COVID started. And I think there's still the aftermath. What we hear a lot of is we couldn't be with people when they were in the hospital. We couldn't do funerals. We said we were going to do memorial services later when COVID eased up, and that didn't happen. And there's just a lot of continuing fallout and stressors that kind of are cumulative. So we know that those stressors are ongoing, and that staff and key volunteers and congregations are often lightning rods for those kinds of things. So aware of those stressors and issues. And also see from Stacy a lot of stress on a personal level coming back and pressure to get families back. I absolutely, people feel protective. They're not quite sure the pandemic's over, and then something crops up and it's not really feeling over. and there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of resources that are more scarce, both people and financial. So in the midst of all of this stress, we can start to feel like there are more demands than we have resources for. And that's kind of a key element of burnout and compassion fatigue that we spend a lot of time in other programs talking about. Our focus today on resilience is, as Pat said, just finding ways to keep going and to keep going in ways that are as healthy and strong as we can. So one of the things that we know about resilience is that it's helpful to stay in touch with what we find meaningful about our work. So whether that's paid work or volunteer work or both, all of you in this virtual room, I'm sure, feel a strong commitment to the work that you do. And our work reflects what we value in life, what we value as people of faith. So staying in touch with that is important. I emailed you a copy of our handout. You may have it. You may have printed out some of the pages. If not, hopefully you got the email to be able to have something to write on and with. And if not, just reflect on this question. And that is, what do I find meaningful about the work that I do? So if you have the handout, that's the first question on page 2. Just reflect on that for yourself. Couple sentences. What do I find meaningful about the work I do? Okay. So hopefully you got a few things written down or put into your head and mind. So now the next sort of thing I'd like to ask you to do, either in writing or in as you think about it, is think about the phrase, I do this work because, and then complete that sentence. So it's going to be fairly short, but for your own self and your own work, I do this work because, and I'll give you about 30 seconds to finish that sentence. All right. Hopefully you were able to finish that sentence. And I want to mention, if for some reason you didn't get the handout, I do have your emails. I can resend it. Everything that Pat and I are sharing in terms of tools is in the handout. So you don't need to write down instructions or copy anything down because it's all in there. So another tool that we use a lot, and I'll say that in Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, we only teach resilience tools that we ourselves use. So this is one that I use. It's called a doorknob affirmation. It helps us stay in touch with why we do what we do. And so it's really simple. Before you walk into a meeting or pick up the phone or click on a Zoom meeting, you can say out loud to yourself or think to yourself, I do this work because, and then you finish that sentence that you just wrote. And it just kind of reminds you, that one liner of, this is why I do the work. And even when it's a challenging meeting, or it's going to be fractious, or you're just tired, reminding yourself of the why you do the work you do can be helpful. That sense of purpose, our motivation, even when things are tough. So for me, as a minister and a psychologist working in emotional and spiritual care, I do this work because I feel it's a way that God can use the talents and training that I have. Pretty simple, but sometimes really helpful to remind myself, this is why I do what I do. And I did notice in the chat that someone didn't get the handout, so we'll make sure that we get that to you. Pat?
Our self-awareness is key to our resilience, especially if we are mindful of the kinds of things that stress us out. And if we know how we typically respond to stress, that helps us, again, to be able to do something about these things to come to better outcomes and a more positive way of being. So perhaps to begin, we can start with writing down on your paper. And again, it's in the handout following. We've pretty much followed, the prompts follow what we're doing here. Stressors. What are the kinds of things that get to you? Are there particular persons that when you know you're going to be with them, the stress reaction already starts? Are there situations that get to you and you know they don't get to everybody, but this one or that one gets to you? What are the things that stress you out? And just take a moment to jot those down or become aware of them. Then I'm sure you all know that people tend to have physical responses to stress. So again, becoming aware of what those are for you can be very helpful. So again, just write down what your own physical responses are. It may be digestive. Things may happen with your breathing, with your muscles, with your sleep patterns. What kinds of physical reactions are you aware of when you get stressed? I'll confess that one of mine is right here. It's not in the other shoulder, it's right here. And when I get stressed, that just clenches to the max. And I am aware of it right away. Would some of you share some of your own physical reactions to stress? I think maybe we can do this if you want. If it's better for you to use the chat, please do. But I think maybe we can just have a sort of informal conversation here and not raise hands. If we need to resort to that, we will. But just what are some of your physical reactions to stress? Just unmute and tell. Stacy?
Well, I'm a director of children's ministries, and I have to do the children's message every Sunday. And coming back from the pandemic, and after all the time videoing myself, which was a little, I got used to doing that, going back into in person and knowing that we were also live streaming makes me incredibly nervous, so that I can't sleep, or I have crazy dreams, anxious dreams at night, the night before. And then I sometimes feel like I'm going to pass out. I can go blank very easily. So I have to always have notes in front of me. Even if I know my message by heart, I could go blank in an instant. And I don't know how to, I try to breathe and do all these calming things, but it's very difficult for me.
Thank you, Stacy. Others? Kathy?
I hear you, Stacy. I feel the same way sometimes that you know something by heart and you just go completely blank. And I overthink things and I just can't get things out of my mind. And then I can't sleep. And then I have fibromyalgia, so it causes that to flare up. So it just, and same thing, I just have trouble calming myself back down.
Okay. One or two more?
My camera isn't working, so I apologize, but I find myself holding my breath or breathing very shallowly.
Yeah.
And sometimes then I find that my shoulders are up and my neck and shoulders become very, yes, my shoulders up to my ears. Those are some of the biggest things that I find.
Yeah. So being aware of where stress sits in our bodies can help us. It may not always occur to us to say, oh, you know what? I'm stressed out. But we can say, my shoulder hurts, or I have a headache, or I'm noticing my breathing. And that can be the clue to us to say, okay, I notice it now. What will I do about it? Let's do one more noticing before we move on. And that is our typical emotional responses to stress. They may show up in our behavior or in how we're interacting, but how do you feel? What are your emotions and feelings when stress gets to you? And again, just write some of those down. One of mine is that this typically mild-mannered person becomes very cranky. Very, very cranky. I try to behave myself. I don't often get snarky, but inside I'm definitely cranky. What are some others, if you're willing to share?
I want to eat things that I just want to mindlessly eat.
Yeah.
I find myself procrastinating, kind of like in freeze mode, where I just will put things off, and being more impatient with the people that I'm around most, and find myself not really listening to people too.
Yeah.
I have trouble not just going from thing to thing to thing. I'm got to be in constant motion rather than being able to just stop.
Yeah. So when we notice these kinds of things and when we realize maybe this isn't how I want to operate, then we're beginning to do the work of resilience. These questions are questions that you can use with people you work with. There may be certain occasions when you just want to address with them your sense that stress is around in the interactions that you are in with them. And to go ahead and work through these questions is a way of helping people become self-aware, and also to put names on those things instead of just sort of going around vaguely feeling not right, we can put names on them, and that begins to use the parts of our brain that can be most helpful to us as we work with stress. So, Kathy?
Thanks. So I just want to say to Stacy, who you can go blank. I think most of us in ministry and teaching have had those moments, and it sounds to me like you're actually doing what you need to do, which is the fail safe is it's written down. One of my best friends is a minister, and he went blank leading the Lord's Prayer one day in worship, just lost all the words, and now he keeps it in front of him because you just never know. So yeah, I think we can relate to that, and that's a good move. Have it written down. And so, you know, that our work in resilience, as Pat's been saying, and we've been talking about, is about developing habits that will help us. So if we notice what our stressors are, we kind of know what those are, and those can change over time. So it's helpful to check in with ourselves, notice the physical response, notice the emotional response. We can do that ourselves. Sometimes we can have a trusted friend or someone else who, if I say, you know, I get snarky or I get quiet when I get stressed, let me know if you see that. Sometimes friends and colleagues can help us notice when it's time to step in and do something that will help us function better. One of the tools that we started with that Pat shared was just observe your breath. And one of the things we know from all the reading that we do in resilience work and trauma recovery is breath and breathing and getting oxygen to our brains are just, there's an untold wealth of literature that says that's so crucial. So breathing well, breathing in through our nose all the time, awake or sleeping, is a habit that from ancient times has been recommended. So I'm going to share another simple tool now that some of you probably already know, and it's called 4-7-8 breathing. It's a very simple relaxation tool. Again, it's one I use all the time. And I used to have those crazy dreams at night too, sometimes, especially when I was preaching in a new congregation. And so if this is something that happens to you, you wake up in the middle of the night and you start thinking about everything you've ever done wrong in your life, or everything that could go wrong, or everything on your to-do list, 4-7-8 breathing, let me tell you, from my experience, can really help. So it's very simple. I'm going to tell you how it works. Then we're going to go through it together once at my pacing us, and then I'm going to give you a chance to pace yourself through it once. So you basically going to close your mouth, breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, and exhale through your mouth audibly to a count of 8. So 4-7-8 is one breath cycle. Normally, we would recommend that you complete 3 to 4 breath cycles and then just breathe normally. What's important is that ratio, and that we're breathing out more fully than we took breath in. So we're fully emptying our lungs and our diaphragm. So I'm going to take us through it once. And so just do this with me. Close your mouth. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to give you a chance to just do that yourself, 4-7-8 at your own pace, and I will do it as well. Okay, I'm going to guess you've each had a chance to do that. Again, do it if this seems like it might be helpful or it is helpful already. Practice it during the day, and it can become your go-to stress release when you notice your breath is shallow or fast or breathing through your mouth. Do a 4-7-8 cycle, 2, 3, or 4 of those. Try it at night if that's something that could help. I can tell you that when I do it at night, I don't always fall right back to sleep. Sometimes I do in the middle of counting, but usually at least the thought cycle slows down and I'm calm and I can get back to sleep. So that's one that I recommend you think about trying. And I want to pause and just ask, as Pat mentioned, we know you all have things you do and wisdom yourselves. Are there any in the moment stress kind of relieving tools that you all use that you might want to share with the group?
Sorry, my camera's not up, but my favorite one that I'd love to share and do is an ice pack on your chest, especially when anxiety gets really high and your breath starts to catch or your chest starts to vibrate. Getting an ice pack straight to your chest truly helps. There's also now things, not just weighted blankets, but weighted stuffed animals. And the weighted stuffed animals can be a weight without being too much weight, that can kind of help in the moment.
Yeah, thank you. It is a tool that people use with trauma survivors to literally put their head in a bowl of cold water. But I've been hearing more about the ice pack because it's not quite as extreme. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have something?
For me, swimming laps helps.
Oh, okay. Yep. The repetitive swimming laps. Yep. Thank you.
There was something I learned a while back from a child development expert. Her name is Becky Bailey, and she would have parents or teachers teach kids to say, "I'm safe and I can handle it," just to themselves 3 times or more if needed. And I taught that with my kids, and even for myself, it works. It just helps. It calms my brain down, and it's helped.
Yes, and that's another one that a lot of people are talking about, that just, I'm safe, I can do this, or as you said, I can handle it. Something that works and that can be repetitive. And I think what we find is we start to breathe a little better when we say those things. So yeah, thank you. And again, these kind of things, if you use them or if you develop some new tools that you use, you can share them with others. I hear recently all the time about weighted blankets, weighted vests. I hadn't heard about weighted animals, stuffed animals, but I think I'm going to look into that. So yeah, I think these are things we can share with other people. And that little bit of vulnerability, with colleagues or friends can be helpful too, to say, yeah, when I get stressed, here's what I do. And I think that's something that we can all use in these days. So thanks, Pat.
You probably, if you didn't think it, it won't surprise you that self-care is part of what we're going to be talking about. That's a word that's been thrown around a lot, maybe to the extent that it's lost meaning, or it means different things to different people. And yet we're going to go ahead and claim that term because it is so helpful for our resilience. What we mean by it is taking responsibility for our own lives. It can start in the moment of noticing that we're stressed out and doing something to relax, breathe, break into it, and then shift ourselves. But also self-care is a big picture phenomenon as well, a lifestyle that we can develop. And we've heard it out in the air all the time. Take time to have a real meal, a real sit-down meal, preferably with other people. Take time to sleep. Be sure to take some time to exercise. Oh, and don't forget your hobbies and your creative outlets. And the typical response is, if I had the time to do those things, I wouldn't be so stressed out. Well, yes. And we suggest that much of what we're talking about here does require our attention and our work, but doesn't always have to take a lot of time. We need to develop some new habits, and that requires something of us. But once we have a new habit, the habit itself can help carry us, help win the day for us. So the arenas of diet, sleep, and exercise are sort of the go-tos for self-care. So take a moment now to reflect on how you are in those three arenas. Is there something that you have decided to do and are doing that works for you, and you notice the benefits of it when it comes to healthy eating? Do you have a practice when it comes to your sleep pattern that is useful to you? Where are you with exercise and how that affects your resilience? Just write down one thing in each of those areas that you are doing, that you can affirm, or that you might like to try to develop the habit of doing it. I realized as I was preparing to be with you during this time that I have, over a period of years really, lessened the amount of my caffeine intake. And I think it started when my caffeine intake was rather high, and I noticed that I was like swinging from the chandeliers, and I realized, wait a second, I don't think this is the best way to operate here. And so I just began to make some conscious decisions about when to consume caffeine. I rarely consume caffeine after noon. And at this point, I do want my cup of coffee in the morning, but that's pretty much it anymore. And I'm also aware of, I have never developed a great love of drinking water. I just think it's sort of boring, but I know that it's the best thing. And it hydrates. And so especially when I'm in the midst of doing things and don't need to drink for entertainment, I just drink water and it gets into me and helps me out, and it works. So again, what are some of the things that you have that work for you? Stacy?
I'm an artist, and I try every night, no matter what time it is, no matter how tired I am, if I don't get to it earlier, I always do a little sketch or a little watercolor painting, because if I go a day without doing it, my stress level gets really high. And so I found that that is like an easy practice just to kind of quiet my mind, and it helps me. And then with sleep, because I have trouble sleeping, I started journaling. So I find if I write at night before I go to sleep and try to get out my thoughts, it does help.
Thanks. Couple others?
I've been ordering meals from HelloFresh for the last 6 months,
Ah,
and I eat better. But I've noticed since Christmas, I've been, not having a delivery because I just have been too stressed and too busy with things, and I know that I don't have the time to cook, and so I have to get back to that. But yeah, as long as I can make half an hour to make the meal, because everything comes prepackaged, and so I used to be great at buying vegetables and putting them in the crisper and letting them rot. But it all comes prepackaged, and you have exactly what you need, and you use it, and there aren't leftovers, and I feel much better, and I eat much better. So
yeah, thank you. Yes, Anne?
For me, yoga.
Hmm.
And walking with a friend. And I kind of fell off the wagon at Christmas. Part of that was first Christmas without my dad. So I was eating my feelings. So now I'm trying to get back in a groove of yoga and walking with a friend once a week for a good hour. And that's really helpful.
Yeah, thanks. So when it comes to diet, certainly observing any recommendations that health professionals may have made would be important. We also suggest that maybe looking into the Mediterranean diet is a possibility. This is a plant-based approach to eating with some fish and dairy. And it can easily be Googled so you can see what it's all about. But any kind of attention to what we are consuming is helpful. Sleep, there's just no way around it. 6 to 8 hours of sleep is better. Studies have shown it. It's not just that our parents said to us at bedtime, now get into bed. It's that it actually helps our well-being. It lets our bodies be useful to us as we are seeking our own resilience. The same thing with eating your vegetables, as Joe was talking about. So 6 to 8 hours, preferably a set time or near the same time every night going to sleep. If we do that, what happens is that our bodies start helping us get to sleep because they get sleepy if they get in the habit knowing that it's time. And it sends a message somehow to us that says, okay, I get to stop now. And so we can spend more time in recovery mode. It's kind of a hit the reset button. And the other factor with sleep is stopping with screens before we go to bed, partly because the screens themselves have physical effects on us that keep us jazzed up, and partly because we're watching or doing things that take us away from ourselves. So sleep, basically the thing about sleep is do it rather than not doing it. Exercise, we've all heard it, 20 to 30 minutes a day, 4 to 5 days a week, some aerobic exercise. But it doesn't have to be, I need a new wardrobe, I need to drive to the gym, I need to drive home from the gym, I need to take a shower. It doesn't have to be all that. It can be the simple things of parking at the far end of the parking lot. You can set a timer in your phone once an hour, once every 2 hours, to just get up out of your chair and walk around the room before you sit back down again. Especially if you are in work that is sedentary, that can be very valuable. So developing the simple things is a great idea.
And I'm impressed with Kathy because it looks like she's standing.
I am standing. I almost always stand when I present on Zoom, and I do stand a lot. And for a long time, I was doing more sitting and had an orange sticky note on my computer that just said move. It's like, so I look at that. Oh yeah, I should get up and move. But yeah, as Pat said, it doesn't have to be rocket science. It doesn't have to be complicated, but finding what works for us. For me, I am good at leaving things to rot in my refrigerator, but if I buy pre-peeled little carrots and pea pods and things, I actually, they're there, I eat them. I'm going to tell a story that I shared with the group yesterday. Pat and I tried to work together and go to dinner when we got here Wednesday night. Didn't know there was a giant concert here in town and restaurants were not available. And we stood and waited for an hour, only to be told they hadn't even gotten to the wait list yet. So we gave up, went to the hotel gift shop, and I was rummaging around. I was going to get protein bars, and I found the Ben & Jerry's ice cream and said to Pat, they have ice cream. And Pat said, where? So we had ice cream for dinner. And once in a while, that's okay. So we do our best. And then there's days where we just eat ice cream for dinner. So one of the things that we have shifted in our work over the years, especially because we typically are working with disaster responders and that work, but in COVID, we've been doing a lot with faith leaders, with other partners who are not necessarily responding to a specific external disaster. And we've gotten in touch with and are sharing the ideas that staying in touch with what brings us joy, what lifts our spirits in the moment, is another really crucial component of resilience. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It's just taking time every day, maybe a couple times a day, to take a break and get in touch with what brings us joy, what brings a smile to our face, what makes us feel good just for that moment. Simple things. For some of us, it's cat videos. For some of us, it's pictures on our phone. It might be objects we have in our home or our office that just we look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a wonderful memory. So I wanted to give you just a couple 30 seconds or so to write down or just reflect on 2 or 3 simple things you can actually do anytime during the day or evening that will lift your spirits. So jot or think about what those are. I'm going to guess most of you have thought of something. I will share a couple of mine and invite you to share yours. I have a 4-month-old grandson. So needless to say, I have 700,000 pictures on my phone of Grace. And all I have to do is look at his little smiling face. And I'm transported from whatever it was that was stressing me to just a happy place. I've also got pictures of my kids' weddings, old pictures of us when we were younger and the kids were younger. And I'll just take a moment in the house and look at those, walk around and look at those and just remember sort of the joy that is in my life and in the world. Would anyone else like to share something that they have made a note of that you do or could do to just lift your spirits at the moment? Kylie says walking her dog.
Along the same kind of lines, I have 2 small 20-pound dogs. And if I'm home and I'm able to put one on one side and one on the other and just love on them and let them love on me, I notice that just seems to bring everything to a better place. And I also read a while back that just 6 minutes of reading like a book or something can also help you relax. So if I can just think I'm just going to read for 6 minutes or 8 minutes, that helps me calm down and feel a lot more grounded in a better place.
Yep, I've been doing that too. Been reading one of my just fun, silly books every once in a while during the day, just to break everything up. Kathy mentions also walking dog or playing with the dog. I know most of us on Zoom have seen cats walk across the screen. So I think for those of you who are cat owners, cats can be fun. Putting on music and dancing alone, which there's a huge amount of literature right now about dancing by ourselves, moving to music, huge for resilience and well-being. So thanks for bringing that one up, Stacy. That just keeps cropping up everywhere. All right, so those are all wonderful things. One thing I do want to mention, and I know you've heard this, but I'm going to say it again, is limiting the amount of time we spend on social media and watching the news and reading the news, doom scrolling, they call it. It's not just limiting the time, but remembering not to do it when we first wake up or before we go to bed. Habits that are hard to break, but important. And the other thing I want to mention is when we talk about The resilience tools that we're mentioning, the simple things, the breathing, the 4-7-8, progressive muscle relaxation, whatever those are. If you know that and most of us have to stay in touch with what's happening in the world, and in the disaster world, we have to read about the disasters. The shootings in California have been nonstop this past week. So we have to, and most of us have to stay up on what's happening in the world, but we can be intentional about it. And we can say, I'm going to spend 20 minutes getting caught up reading the news, but before I do that, I'm going to ground myself, or I'm going to do breathing. I'm going to do something to relax myself, and I'm going to limit that time, and I'm going to relax again before I go back to the rest of my work. So we can be pretty intentional about knowing that we're going to expose ourselves to challenging and difficult news and information that we have to be aware of, but do it in a way that is at least as resilience maintaining as we possibly can. So thank you. Pat?
There's another kind of tool that we want to offer you to experience now. It's called grounding. Grounding can be used when we're in a meeting or on a Zoom and having trouble paying attention, or when we're fidgeting from anxiety or spacing out because we're nervous about something, when the concentration is gone, when we're just not quite all there. Grounding can help us come back and be all where we are, all in where we are. So it uses touch, and it can be something simple, just with your hands, and you can do it without anybody knowing you're doing it. So you can just quietly get your act back together while stuff is going on around you. So some people carry a special stone or coin or talisman in their pocket or their purse that they just touch and manipulate. And it just sort of helps settle. But you can do it with anything, and it can be whatever's available at the moment. So just look around you now and just pick up something that's in front of you. A pen, the collar of your shirt, the edge of your seat, or the table, the edge of the table, and just be with that object with your fingers and just attend to it. Notice the shape, the size, the hardness, softness, texture. Just be with that object. And then as you, again, draw your attention back to the room, notice if there has been any change in the quality of your being fully present. One thing not to do is this. You all hear that? No pen clicking for grounding. You can also use your feet. So I invite you to sit comfortably erect with both feet on the ground and just feel the soles of your feet against your socks or shoes or the floor, whatever your feet are on. Just feel the soles of your feet against what is next to them. And then feel the floor beneath you, supporting you through your feet. All of this is through your feet. Let your feet convey to you the floor, and beneath the floor, through the building, down to the foundation, to the ground. The ground beneath your feet is there sustaining you. Just feel it with this sensory aspects of the soles of your feet. And then again, just notice what that does for you. And you can do that whenever it suits you. So onward.
So all of these things that we've been talking about, self-care in the moment, or self-regulation, or just relaxation exercises, is that chance to notice when stress is happening, step into the space between the stressor and how we respond, and make a little shift. So whether it's breathing, grounding, relaxing our muscles when we notice they're tight, all of those things can help us step into the space between the stress and the response and shift just a little bit. What I want to talk about now is not quite in the moment, but it's more of a lifestyle choice, and something that I think most of you know, and the research is just burgeoning all the time, that for good mental health, for resilience, for healthy aging, and even most recently for prevention or reduction of symptoms in Alzheimer's disease, which is my first career, relationships are just absolutely crucial. If there were only two things you took from today, I would say it would be breathing and relationships. And then the list would go on, but I'm going to say paying attention to fostering our positive relationships. I just saw an article about some woman who's 110 who said her key to longevity is cutting out toxic relationships in her life. So there's that, they're setting boundaries. But really, really paying attention to having people in our lives who will listen to us deeply and fully when we need to tell our story. I would be surprised if there's anyone on this Zoom who's not a good listener. I think you probably know the value of listening to others. And I want you just to reflect for a moment on a time when you were being listened to, when someone deeply and carefully listened to you when you needed to talk. Just take 10, 15 seconds and reflect on a time when you were really, truly heard. So I hope you were all able to think of a time. And, you know, in our longer workshops, we spend a lot of time with this, and we talk about those, how it benefits us. And I think what we know is that it helps us process what's happened to us. It helps us realize what we're feeling and thinking, and helps us just feel that someone is with us in something that perhaps has been challenging or difficult. Telling our story, especially hard stories, difficult stories, challenging stories, can help release the hold that those feelings and emotions can have on us. So I hope that each of you have a few people in your life, could be a partner, could be a spouse, could be a family member or a colleague, who listens to you. And those are important. What we talk a lot about in PDA is having what we call an intentional listening partner. And there's a description of this in the handout. And again, I've got the chat saved, so I'll get it to everyone. But an intentional listening partner is going to be someone we recommend that's not the person you live with, that's not your partner, that's not your closest family member, but someone else who you know will listen to you when you need to be heard. It's someone that you really form a covenant with, that you can say, Pat, will you be my intentional listening partner? And by that, I mean, can I text you or call you and say, hey, in the next day or two, can you give me 20 or 30 minutes to have a conversation? And it's going to be someone that you trust, someone who will not judge you, someone who knows you well, and someone who will keep confidential everything you say. And it's going to be someone who's not going to need to talk about their own stuff when you've asked to talk about yours. So those are all really important components of an intentional listening partner. I've got 4 or so in my life, friends, colleagues, who are my intentional listening partners. And the key to this is that what you need for and ask for from that person may shift from January to February to March. So I might call a friend and say, I've been going through this stuff. I just need to talk. I just need to vent. I just need you to listen. I don't need advice. And I need someone to listen who's not my spouse or my child. Another time it might be, I have gotten myself in a mess and I need some help figuring out some next steps. So will you listen to what's happened? And then will you think with me and problem solve with me and help me look at some next steps? So the key is you're telling the person in advance what you need this time. And they're going to know, Kathy just needs me to listen. Kathy welcomes me giving her thoughts and feedback this time. So an intentional listening partner is going to be someone that we really can trust to do what we need in that particular moment. And I will say that the one I'm thinking of now is a dear friend and also a minister, and he laughs a lot and easily, and he will sometimes just laugh when I tell him something dumb I've really done. And it's not laughing at me, but it lightens my mood. But he will also be the first to give me some ideas about what to do next, if that's what I'm looking for. So I want to give you a chance now to either jot down on a piece of paper or your handout, or think to yourself, who is an intentional listening partner for you already, or who could be if you chose to take that route. So just think of a couple names of folks who would fit that description for you. All right, so I hope you were able to think of someone. If you didn't in the moment, come back to that later. And the last thing I want to say about relationships is just, and it's so hard, but we can lose touch with the people who are life-giving, who are positive, who just are wonderful to be with, because we get so busy. And so again, encourage all of us to make sure that we make a note of who those people are and find ways to stay in touch. It can just be texts, it can be phone calls. I have a good friend and colleague who has gotten, we are in the habit now, we have a phone call, we live many states apart. We don't hang up from our phone call without setting the next time we're going to talk. And we might change it, but we've got something on the calendar that we know we're going to stay in touch. So whatever might work for you to stay in touch with those positive, life-giving relationships, again, such an important pillar of resilience. Pat.
Another arena for us to consider as we want to foster our resilience is our spiritual life. Having a spiritual life, a vibrant, life-giving spiritual life, again, makes all the difference in how we are when stress comes down the pike. And in times of stress, sometimes our spiritual practices get lost in the shuffle. We feel too busy, or just we're so preoccupied that even if we sit down to try to do something spiritual, we're just not there. And in the last few years, people are talking more and more about there's the needs, the practices that may be helpful may need a shift. Things are different now. And so what used to work doesn't seem to quite fit anymore. And so what do we do to enter into our spiritual life fully and have it be a basic life-giving part of our life? So just take a moment now to ponder, to just notice, how is your spiritual life? And then we especially want to spend some time with what is helpful to us in being sure that we're connected with God, that we are coming from our relationship with God, that we embody the person that we are created to be. And so what are the things that are most helpful to you now to help you feel connected, to help you know that you are in a community of faith, to give meaning to your life? One of mine is that I need time in the morning just to be quiet. It used to be that I'd do a bunch of things in that time, and now it's the quiet that really feeds me. So what are some of those things for you?
I don't know if this is just me. So if it is, I guess I'll just vent this one out. I find this hard. I do, like, my job is spiritual development in children. So I spend a lot of time caring for kids and trying to find ways to build up my own faith. But in the midst of COVID, I had, my daughter was diagnosed with autism, and now I work full time and I go to therapies with her all the time, and I don't have time. Like, I know we talk about how our life gets busy, but this season of my life has taught me that there are times where you don't, where I think about that scripture verse where it talks about where the Spirit intercedes on your behalf with wordless groans. But I feel as if for a year and a half, 2 years of my life, it has been wordless groans because my time is no longer mine. My time is now spent trying to survive day to day. I know I'm not the only parent who feels that way. And I loved when you said, like, sometimes the spiritual practices that we were doing just aren't working anymore, because I have felt that way since COVID. But I don't have a response to this for you because I haven't found my own answer. I haven't even found a way to connect with God in a way that I know my spirit so desperately needs when time is gone. So I don't know how to answer that for you, but that's my answer.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Certainly, knowing that there has been a spiritual word that acknowledges exactly what you're in and says, these things happen, and the groans too deep for words happen right along with them. That in itself.
And I would just add to that, and I thank you for sharing that. And as someone who's been a caregiver to older adults in my life, I've found that my spiritual practice in those busy times is just the caregiving. It is the giving to others. That's it. That's what I'm doing, and that's how I'm connecting and serving God. It's the busyness and it's what I'm doing, but it's in service, in your case, for your daughter, and that's sufficient.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you.
Pat, I'm going to say there's a couple things in the chat. Scripture reading and meditation for Kathy, and for Stacy, trying not to say yes to everything people ask of me. An incredible and difficult spiritual practice to absolutely.
I can share. I don't have my camera on, sorry. I think something that I've been wrestling with is that, I work for a church, I do ministry, but I
don't go to church, if that makes sense. Like I'm not in the service, I'm not hearing the sermon and being a part of like a community in that sense. Like I'm ministering to the kids and to the volunteers. So that really, really this fall was really big. Just like a big struggle, because I just felt I was just like, I'm working, I love doing this work, but like I'm not that it's all about getting something out of it, but I'm just like not being fed. So recently, I've just started listening to like sermons from this other church that I have gone to previously, just before I was working in church ministry. And that has kind of made a difference just in my life, because like it's time for me to take, by myself or with my spouse, and we're able to listen to the sermon and like kind of have like our own space where I'm not having to worry about doing my job or ministering or what have you. And so like that's kind of been a new rhythm that we're trying to practice, and I think has made me feel like more hopeful about like continuing in ministry.
Yeah, that especially for those of us, and probably most people on this Zoom are in this group, of our work and our spirituality are commingled so much that sometimes it's one or the other that can get out of balance. And so just identifying, oh, I can be with a sermon that's not part of the community that I'm serving, just to give myself something that is explicitly mine for my spiritual well-being, and especially with the person that I do it with. So, yeah. Anything else anybody wants to offer here? Another related.
Sorry,
Yeah.
there's just one in the chat. I had myself muted. Angel just said, likes the idea of listening to sermons outside of my ministry job. Thank you. So yeah, affirm that for sure.
Yeah, so we knew that there's wisdom in this group that would help each other. So another area is gratitude. And as we've been saying, this is not just some fluffy thing that somebody has thought of, but studies have been done, and being mindful of gratitude makes a big difference. And partly it's just to take the time to notice what we're grateful for, sort of redirects. If we are living in the midst of stressful circumstances, right in the middle of that, to say, what am I grateful for right now? Or what am I grateful for at this time in my life? Just shifts our whole orientation. And so unsurprisingly, we'll ask you to jot down some things that you are grateful for. In a conversation with a friend about gratitude, I was reminded that not only can I feel the gratitude and have that really nurture me, but I can say out loud to another person what I'm grateful for. And if I'm grateful to them, I can tell them. And that embodies the gratitude in a different way so that my whole being gets into it. So what are some of the things that came to you? Anne?
There were a number of people from the congregation I currently serve and also my home church who were fantastic in the late stages of my dad's life. And my mom was also going through cancer at the time, so it was a double whammy. So I just felt uplifted, and I could actually feel that through the last 2 months. And that was huge, absolutely huge. So speaking that gratitude, as you said, was really helpful as well, and giving people Christmas gifts. And, you know, that helped me get through Christmas was doing that.
Yeah. And in the chat, we have wisdom as we age, moving around, laughing. Good ones all. What else? Kathy mentioned what not to start and stop our day with, the bad news of the day. Well, gratitude is something we could start and end our day with, to just go into our day, maybe just as we're walking out the door or driving to work or getting to work, to be with what we're grateful for takes us into that place grateful. And as we come home, what are we grateful for? Or at the end of the day, before part of our sleep process might be some remembering, perhaps journaling, what we're grateful for. So, Kathy?
Thanks. So I'm just going to put in the chat the name of an app that I use as a spiritual practice. Before I went to seminary, I did the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius with my spiritual director, who's been my spiritual director for 26 years. And I'm a big fan of apps that can help us, you know, the sacred space. If you go through it, it might take 2 or 3 minutes or 10, just depends on what you want. Lots of apps that can just remind us. And sometimes just looking at it on my home screen reminds me, I haven't been in prayer today, or I haven't really thought about what I'm grateful for. There's lots of apps for gratitude. I've got one that reminds me, I set it, you set the time you want, 10 at night, because I'm a night owl, and it just has a little prompt to think about something specific or different that I'm grateful for. And I've got a reminder on my phone at 9:30 every morning that just says grateful. It's not complicated, but it breaks up my cycle of doing and just reminds me, okay, what am I grateful for in the moment? So lots of apps out there and tools that don't have to take a lot of time and can just remind us of some of the things that we know we want to try to do, even for 10 seconds or 30 seconds. So I encourage you to think about simple things, simple tools that can just help with resilience and well-being. So as we come to the end of our time today, I want to share just a couple sort of tools for the end of the day. Some of these you may already do, and I'm just going to share a couple. One is when we do have a lot on our plate, when we're caring for a lot of people, when they're weighing on our hearts and minds, or when there's too many tasks to get done today or this week, it can be helpful to write those down at our workplace, whether that's home or somewhere else, and put them in an object, put them in a sacred jar, put them in a desk drawer, write them down, put them aside, and tell ourselves we're going to leave those till tomorrow. They are in God's care. They don't need my ruminating over tonight. They'll be there tomorrow, but I'm going to let them be tonight. And you might say a breath prayer for them at night, might just be tasks that you say, this is for tomorrow. I'm a huge maker of to-do lists. And I found out that my daughter and I make to-do lists and we put things on it that we've already done just to make ourselves feel better, right? So, yeah. But a to-do list that we just intentionally set aside can be really helpful. The other thing that we can do, that I do, is not always at the end of the day, sometimes in the middle of the day, is something that's stressful or just causing me to be a little tense, is to take in a deep breath through my nose and think about what that is, and then whoosh the breath out through my mouth and let it go, and just be really intentional about, this is what's tensing me up, and I am going to let that go for now. So again, it's breathing, but it's also being intentional about letting go of, as in the South, we say, what's getting on my last nerve today? This thing, and I'm going to let it go. The last thing I want to do is just one that's fun, that I like to do, and you can stand if you want, or just sit or do it with me or not, but it's shaking off the day the way a dog shakes off water when it's been out in the rain. And so literally you just either sit or stand, and again, maybe think about what the day's been, what the stresses have been, and shake it off. Shake off your head and shake off your arms and shake off both your legs and pretend you have a tail and shake that off, and just kind of let the mess of the day drop to the floor and leave it there. And just shaking off. I just love doing that. So different things you can do. Some of the things in our handout you can look at for end of the day, but just something to kind of, let it go. So those are some things that we share and that we do to end our day in ways that'll be resilience building and help us. So we come to the end of our time. We're so glad that you were here with us. Remember the breathing, remember the relationships, the joy, the gratitude, whatever grounds you and connects you to God in ways that can be very, very simple. Hold on to those, use them, share them. And we want to thank you for the work that you're doing in your congregations and your other places, and know that PDA and Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, we're always here. We can come to your presbyteries and synods and congregations, not just in times of disaster, but to do this kind of resilience building work. We don't charge. We just need an invitation through your mid-council. So we are here with you and here to support you, and are grateful for you. So thank you.
And thank you for your thank yous. There's a bunch in the chat.
Yes, thank you.